What do you want to tell the world about this idea?
um,
No,
no, you're right. I want to make
like,
money.
There's a lot of different things yeah, right. Well, that's just it. Like, there's a lot of different.
So many variables.
Yeah. Welcome back, everybody, to the Jet Life podcast. Today, I am joined with Barry Bear Lambert from Sky Aviation. I'm so excited to have you here today, Barry. Thanks for being on the podcast.
No, thank you, Tom.
All right, man. Well, let's hop right into it. I know our paths have crossed a couple of times from brokerage, sales, and charter such, so I'm really glad to have you here and finally have an opportunity to speak with you face to face. Let's dive in by talking about management. Let's talk about, why, in your opinion, people should be considering management companies when it comes to their private jet.
Well, frankly, because they're complex machines. And I know that one of the things that people look at is, well, I'm a pilot, I'm a mechanic. You can manage your own aircraft, but in a management company world, you're going to have a chief pilot, a director of maintenance. So you're going to have that specialization of the pilot. You're going to have the specialization of the mechanic. You're going to have a business person also looking over your interests. So you're going to have that combination instead of one specialty. But I don't think that aircraft management's for everybody either. And so there's the aircraft owner world, the aircraft owner operator world. And then once you get above, let's say 12.5 on the aircraft gross weight, the maintenance inspections become more complex, training becomes more complex. It adds a layer of complexity to the aircraft and the operation of the aircraft. And I think that's really when you start needing to seek a professional management company.
Gotcha. No, that makes a lot of sense. When in the buying process do you typically recommend for people to connect with the management company?
Right from the very beginning. But when you're selecting the model of the aircraft, because the management company is used to operating different aircraft, they're going to tell you what has the best dispatch reliability in their experience, what they've seen from a part standpoint, hangar availability, crew training. And I think that's one of the biggest things right now in the environment we live in is when you go to select an aircraft, you're selecting by the mission, but now we also have to look and see what the market availability on parts and training are. Right now, there's some models that you can't get training slots out for a year and a half right now.
What I found very interesting lately is when individuals are coming to me asking me to help them, because they see the content and such, it's been helpful for me to work with them alongside as a guide, and we go through and we've been interviewing management companies and operators. And I think to your point, I personally have always told them, we got to get our finances in line before we go shopping, insurance in line before we go shopping. I hadn't thought about the management company because I always thought of the management company kind of as like a given, like whoever was on the field was going to manage it. But bringing them in early into the conversation, to your point, like you said, if they want a heavy jet, maybe there's no hangar space, or if they want that, maybe there's no pilot availability. So I really appreciate you bringing that to my attention, that we should be looking at the management companies a lot earlier in the process.
No, absolutely. And when you do that too, they can handle your insurance for you because it may change the liability limits. They may have, so for instance, if you were coming on our certificate, we hold a standard for every different type of aircraft that's on the certificate, whether it's $50 million for a VLJ up to $150 million liability for a mid-size aircraft.
Well, let's slide into the 135 world. Before we get into buying a jet and offsetting the cost, let's just talk about those people who want to charter a jet for the first time. Maybe they're looking, they have one or two trips a year, and they're looking to experience private aviation for the first time. What kind of words of wisdom do you have for individuals that are looking into chartering their first private jet?
Start small.
Come on, man. I want the Gulfstream. I want to show up and flex on my friends in Vegas for a bachelor party.
Absolutely. But, get into it. Start by doing ad hoc charter. Build a relationship with build a relationship with a good charter broker. Build a good relationship with an operator. Either way is a good route if you have a good relationship with them. And ask them for their advice. They've got experience in this. Pick someone who's got 5-10 years of experience and trust them, but verify that there will be a good guide for you starting out into this. And that will be the best thing for anyone, whether it's, hey, I need to go to, so I'm in Birmingham, so somebody calls me and says, hey, I need to go Birmingham to St. Simon's Island. I've got 4 passengers. Well, a Citation jet is going to be the perfect airplane for that mission. But they may want something larger, but I'm going to try to guide them with, hey, this is what fits your mission. This is the most economical route. Here's what we also have available.
Right.
So I believe in options and explaining those options and educating the client so that they can become as knowledgeable as we are.
Speaking of options, what do you say to a charter person that's looking between a turboprop and a jet?
Jet.
Oh, okay. So you won't even, maybe a PC-12, maybe something a little bit cheaper.
Let me clarify. Are you talking about?
I mean, I was going to say maybe the mission matters.
No, are you looking from a owner perspective or a charter client perspective?
So I'm someone that wants to try charter for the first time. I'm not going to buy. I can't. I'm not in that world. I don't use a private jet that much. I'm just going to charterhub.com and looking to see, or I'm Googling charter flights from Alabama to Key West, and I'm popping up, and the turboprops look a lot cheaper. Maybe I should just hop.
You're absolutely right. They do. They look a lot cheaper, but they're also a lot slower. So whereas they may be $1,000 an hour less than the light jet option, once you put in, if you're doing a 30-minute trip, an hour-long trip, we're not talking a lot of difference. But if you start looking at a 2 to 3 hour difference, the cost of the speed are going to start matching up to each other.
Great point.
The King Air, the turboprop line, the PC-12, those are fantastic regional aircraft, hour and a half long flight. They're much more capable, but where your speed and your price come out.
So we've gone from chartering for a trip. Now I'm ready to own. But let me ask you, in your experience, when is a good time to start making that shift into ownership? Do you charter a certain amount and then jump to ownership? Do you charter, then do a fractional ownership and then ownership? In your experience, what can you tell, or what can you say to individuals that are kind of thinking about making that jump? What are some things they should consider?
So it's different for every person. It is. Every scenario is unique. And I think that's where we as professionals in management and sales, we have to view that we can't just apply a template and go, okay, this is what you're doing. So some people, they do not want to own. They do not want the responsibility. They do not want to get the phone calls that go, hey, I'm calling you. I need approvals. I'm having to buy a $40,000 windshield.
I don't want that call.
Or, hey, I'm sorry, we just, we landed in Fort Lauderdale and we just had a mechanical. The AOG truck's going to be there in 2 days. And then in 2 days later, hey, they're there. But it's a $25,000 part. We can have it there in 24 hours. And so they don't even want the mental fatigue of that. So they may end up financially okay, not having to shell that roller coaster cash flow out of what is owning an airplane, but they don't want that mental fatigue. Some people don't want the cash flow roller coaster from month to month, where if you flew 50 hours versus if you flew nothing that month. And so it becomes kind of a cash flow roller coaster between fuel expenses, landing fees, engine programs. And then, of course, the putting down for multiple month maintenance. And they go, and the number one question, and I have to explain this to everybody, and you have to see where the aircraft owner's coming from. You mean to tell me that my airplane's going to be in maintenance for a month? My pilot's not going to do anything but sit at home for an entire month, and I still have to pay him? Yes. Yes. Yeah, I hear you. I understand where you're coming from. But yes, that's the kind of company that we are. We do offer that stability for employees.
Yeah, no, 100%. So do you ever talk with owners or potential owners about any fractional ownership?
I have talked to some, and the ones that I talked to, that's where I was transitioning to, is they're looking for a low capital cost, and they're looking for a fixed expense. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times with fractional, I've seen some new models out there that look really good. I haven't seen the results from them. I haven't done enough digging into, but the typical traditional fractional model, low entry level capital cost, a fixed monthly management fee, and then a fixed hourly rate. So you can easily predict your costs for the year,
Yeah.
and that there's not a lot of mental fatigue. There's not a lot of drama and headaches. It's just a good even flow, but there is no offset of your cost. You are paying 100% of the cost.
Let's go buy a jet. Let's go buy a jet. And one of the questions I'm getting a lot of the time is, should I buy a jet? Or I'm thinking about buying a jet. I'm only going to fly it 100 hours or less a year. What can I do while I'm not using it to help offset my costs? Can I make some money? Let's talk about the chartering with buying and then giving it back to a charter company. What have you seen? What do you want to tell the world about this idea? I'll let you go.
There's so many variables.
Yeah.
And so here's all the variables. One, an aircraft is typically not an appreciating asset. 9 times out of 10, it's a tax play that also offers freedom and time.
Yep.
Outside of that, if you charter if you charter an aircraft, if you buy it, put it back on charter, and fly 100 hours or less, you are typically going to offset the majority or all of your cost. Typically.
Yep.
I have seen instances where aircraft owners have flown 100 hours and they have lost operational cost money, and I have seen it to where they have made enough to pay the note on their aircraft. But those were all special market situations. If you look back at 2018, 2019 at the charter pricing versus where the charter pricing was in 21 and 22, there's a roughly anywhere between a 15 to a 35% increase in the per hour pricing. And that extra revenue was shared with the aircraft owners. So the aircraft owners were able to recover some of that money during the downtime in the initial onset of COVID. So
that's a good point.
I can say that I've managed several. It all depends on the type of aircraft too. So when I look at it, I look at it from dispatch reliability. How many days on average during the year does this airplane typically go down for scheduled maintenance? What do we look like in terms of operating cost as well? Where does the operating cost versus what is the average revenue per hour that can be brought in on the charter market? So I take those two things and I find out my delta. And as long as my delta is, we have to, 1, cover operating cost. 2, we have to be able to cover pilot salaries, insurance, hangar costs. Yeah, all the fixed costs that go into it. And I think those are the ones with the most delta are right there in that. And I think we all know what the 2 best models for charter are, and that's really going to hit you towards the Citation XL, the XLS, the Phenom 300, low operating cost, good charter demand, high hourly rate.
But both of those models, within their perspective categories, are more of the premium models in terms of acquisition costs. Like I can get a Lear 60 cheaper than an XLS, but to your point, you got to find that Goldilocks of reliability, parts, maintenance, like it really does depend. And that's where I value. What I love about this year has been the opportunity to walk alongside potential owners and just show them, like literally like a jungle guide. Like I'm hacking away with a machete and just showing them like, here's your world. And then making it easier for them to make a decision based on their business savvy. Because they're successful enough that they can own a jet. So they clearly have decision-making skills. But how can I present the information so that they're not spending all their time, energy, and effort for getting the information, and then they can make an educated decision, because some people are going to want the reliability and the profitability of the citations and the phenoms, and they're going to be okay with the acquisition costs. And some are going to be like, nah, I'd rather, take it this way and have less of an acquisition cost and roll the dice on. And not to say that anything, that's not a citation or phenom is going to break as soon as you fly it, but there are, because you've seen successful models and fleets built on the back of those aircraft, but there are demonstrated patterns to each make and model. And so I agree with you 100% that, that those two are fantastic models. I think midsize is a sweet spot. What do you say about very light jets and putting them back on a certificate? Is it harder, or is it different than a midsize or a heavy?
So I've looked at the turboprop and the very light jet, and they are more difficult. And where you run into the difficulty is on the VLJs. You're right. We do have 6 seats, or we do have 5 seats. However, if we fill up those seats, we're going Birmingham to Atlanta. If we do one passenger, if we do one passenger, we can do DC.
Oh, I love that point.
And so,
that's a great point.
What happens is it confuses the charter client, because then you're trying to understand zero weight and balance, how all of those things work, and you confuse the client. Even though you have the best price point, they're completely confused at this point, because, well, I mean, I may bring them with me. I may have 8 bags with me. So,
I'm curious. I don't. Maybe you might not know this, but do y'all use Avinode? Okay, so if I'm on your website or someone else's website, and I'm punching in maybe Charter Hub, and I'm punching in 6 passengers from Birmingham to DC, and it pulls up the quote for the very light jet, is that anticipating like how many stops you're going to have to make?
For some reason, it's not. So this is a great question, because I was talking to our scheduling team.
That's huge. If it doesn't,
we recently added a Premier 1A onto the certificate, and they said, "Hey, we're getting tons of quotes for this airplane." I said, "Great." Said the only problem is they're all San Francisco to Teterboro. With 6 passengers.
and just for anyone who's new to this, the Premier, what is it, 1,000 nautical miles?
You're looking at 4 people, 900 to 1,000 nautical miles.
And San Francisco to Teterboro, we're looking at what, almost 2,000?
Yes.
So with 6 with a full load, we're going what, maybe like 4 stops?
At minimum 2. And so then they get the quote, and they're going, why does this have so many fuel stops? And so then it becomes another explanation into that. And then when those, and then this goes back into the different pricing models, is, okay, so yes, that's a very affordable option. There's multiple fuel stops now. Fast forward, we have a Citation Sovereign as well. Okay, the Sovereign can do that trip nonstop. Here's what it looks like. $15,000 later. And so you're paying for that extra time and convenience.
That's what I kind of like about aviation. Like, there's a number to that. And if that number is scary, then maybe it's not the right time, to be chartering that, and it's kind of like a gut check.
So I've got one perfect for that analogy. There is, I was selling a Citation Sovereign a few years ago, and he wanted a divider in the middle of the cabin. He goes, "Is that possible?" I said, "One thing that I've learned, anything is possible. I need 2 things from you: time and money."
By the way, when you go to sell it, you're going to take a huge hit on that one, because he's like, who the heck put a divider in the middle of this?
He wanted 2 couches, and he wanted to be able to take a nap.
What is the charter market from an operator's perspective, and for someone who's wanting their jet to be used for charter and to offset costs, what does the charter market look like, in your opinion, 2023 and beyond?
Right now, I mean, looking at it where we come through the year, January and February are always the slowest 2 months of the year. We typically plan most of our scheduled maintenance right now. So we're seeing a softer market than we saw in 2020, 2021, 2022, but we're still in a stronger market than we were pre-COVID. And I think that's going to continue. And there's a couple of reasons. One, the convenience, the time. But two, the airlines, and they do a great job, but at the same time, it's unreliable on a timetable. So when you're working as a business, and I've heard this from many of the business owners that we work with, they cannot rely on the airlines for their business deals. And so they're looking at the cost of doing business, showing up on time, the cost of the transaction that they're handling, but also one of the biggest things that I've seen come out of COVID is our awareness of the work-life balance, right? And so I've heard from multiple business owners that they would rather spend the money so that their employees know they care about them, so they get to make it back home earlier. They get to waste less of their time in the terminals and layovers. And they're trying to do it to also take care of their employees so they have a better work-life balance, because they're seeing that if they do, they're more productive. They get more done. They achieve more. They see the sacrifices that the owner is doing for them.
Yeah, no, I can certainly appreciate that. And I would agree. The market's softening, but we're also at a peak, so that's to be expected. And things will, they will stabilize. They'll find a new normal. And so, I see the demand, continuing. And it's funny because when you talk about this stuff, you kind of almost feel like you have to deal in absolutes. I don't know if you've been seeing this as the market softens. You get buyers that are getting more frothy at the mouth. They're like, "Oh, it's crashing! Like I knew it!" Like it's like, well, there's a balance. There's a medium. There's a something in between of the buyer's market and the seller's market that we had, and an impending doom like buyer's market fire.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. Everybody wants an absolute answer. And here's the absolute answer. There's not one. It is, I mean, I go back to what some models were going for $5 million. Then the demand from COVID started rising. That $5 million went to 5.5, went to 6, went to 7, went to 8, went to all the way up to 9 million to 10 million in some scenarios. And now they're back down to 8. So yes, the market's come down, but it's not where it was during that low point, because there is still demand out there. And what I love is some of the statistics you read in the newsletters that are put out, the news articles that we all read, 50% more inventory that was on the market. I was like, okay. Well, so on an average year, we had somewhere around, correct me if I'm wrong, somewhere between 9 and 12% of all turbines available on the market. And then we got all the way down to 2, and now we're sitting around 3.5 to 4%. We're still not 50%. We're using these big percentages, but if we had 4 aircraft on the market and now we have 8 on the market, we had a 50% jump, but there's still only 8. And then
exactly. No,
and then you ask yourself, of those 8, how many of them have engine programs, no damage history, complete logbooks? And you start whittling through it, and you're like, all right, I've got one good prospect.
Exactly. And so let's talk about the market. We'll shift from charter. It is possible to offset costs. It sounds like what we talked about. So let's talk about.
No, it is possible to offset costs. It does matter on the type of aircraft. And that's where, you go look at I'm going to use an example. You look at a turboprop. A lot of people come to me, they want to do a turboprop because it has the lower operating cost. But they're not looking at what it's sold for on the market. And then you're not looking at the fixed cost. And once you start adding in the fixed cost of hiring a crew, insurance, hangar, all those things, it's not exponentially greater than a light jet
Right.
or a mid-sized jet. It's a
Mm-hmm.
little up, but it's not like 2 times the cost or 3 times the cost. So you still have that
Right.
fixed cost as a hurdle in terms to produce a break-even point or net profitability. So
Mm-hmm.
if you go up
Mm-hmm.
to and say, okay, well, this aircraft operates more per hour, your hours are going to cost more, but you're telling me that you're not going to fly that much and you want it to offset. So this is what generates the most revenue to offset this fixed cost.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no,
and so then we look at from the standpoint of outside of that, we consider operating cost, we consider the revenue generation, the fixed cost, and then what does the market think about this aircraft? So, I mean, so right now, to me, that super light to mid-sized jet is always a good solid market, right? And
yep.
when the economy is good, you have people in turboprops and light jets moving into that category. When the market is bad, you have people from the heavy moving down to that category. So you're in that middle market.
That's a great point.
And so I'm not saying that it's recession proof or anything like that. What I'm saying is that it's one of the most stable markets.
No, I appreciate that
Yeah.
caveat. For sure. For sure. So as we're kind of wrapping up, let's talk about the sales and acquisition side of the market. For sellers, what does 2023 look like for you? I'm seeing an increase in inventory. We kind of talked about it, but of course it's not, pre-COVID inventory yet. Things are staying on the market a little bit longer. And I think what it all comes down to, buyers and sellers are kind of playing chicken in terms of prices. The sellers don't need to sell. The buyers don't need to buy. So it's kind of got everything at like a standstill, and whoever blinks first. I don't think it's going to shoot up or shoot down, but what are you seeing from a seller's perspective? If you're even thinking about selling your jet in 2023, what are some words you might give to somebody?
If you bought it during the COVID era of buying, don't expect the transaction to go the exact way that you bought it. Because in COVID, it was, hey, I found this airplane. We have to have a deposit on it in 2 hours. There's no pre-buy. Go. And I think that's where in COVID, you were seeing a lot of people not do pre-purchase inspections. You were seeing people put up non-refundable deposits before they even saw the aircraft. I mean, there were a lot of things that I'm like, I don't recommend this. I don't recommend this.
But if you want the plane, go ahead.
If you want this, here's what they're saying that they have to have. And so I think I've already sold a couple airplanes as the market's as the inventory levels. I'm not seeing prices drop necessarily, but what I'm seeing is people doing their due diligence. The non-refundable deposit is there the refundable deposit is there instead of the non-refundable. The pre-purchase inspection is in full force. Like, there are people making sure they're buying a quality machine for the price, and not so much buying on price. And I think that's one of the things that I speak to the sellers. I mean, not to the purchasers too. It's not always about price. It's about quality. So if I tell you, I'm gonna pull up. Let's say that we can buy a I don't know. I don't want to pick any one manufacturer, but let's say we can buy airplane A, right? Airplane A is a standard. It's 5,000 hours on the airframe, freshly overhauled engines, engine program, APU program. It's a great airplane. Looks great. Paint interior is good. Okay. We have the same model airplane B, but all the inspections are due. This one's $6 million. This one's $5 million. Spend more for the one that's had the inspections done by a quality shop, because the liability of having a shop open that airplane up, it's a huge. You could come out and it could be the best gift in the world that you've ever had in that shop if you take that gamble. It could also end up with we don't have these parts, we don't have those parts, we don't have these parts. We're going to park it outside, and by the way, we're in a humid climate, so we might have a little bit of corrosion, but we'll do We'll do a compressor wash on the engines once a month.
We'll do our best. No, I love that, because I tell one of the biggest mistakes buyers make is they don't understand the three components of a deal. You know, you can get it quick, you can get it cheap, or you can have like a really good value, right? But we can't have all three. We need 2 out of 3. So pick what is most important to you. Is it the price point? Is it availability? Like, I need it right now. It's the fourth quarter, you know, or is it like a really good plane like that? Which one's your number one? Then pick your number 2, and then, you know, 3 is probably not going to happen. I can get you a really good airplane, okay, but you're not going to have, and I can get it for you now. It's available right now, but it's not going to be at the price point that you want. Or I can get you one at the price point right now, but it's a junkyard special. You know, it's available now. It's at the price point that you want, but you know, it's like you said, airplane B. So if people don't understand those 3 components and how they interlock and relate with one another, they end up being bad negotiators, is what I find. They end up being bad buyers. They come across just as bullies, like, well, just give me what I want, and they end up not buying.
And see, that's where I look at it from the manager standpoint, is because I look at it from the fact that I'm going to be managing the airplane. In a year from now, you're going to get a call from me that X, Y, and Z. So one of the things that I say up front is I understand where you're talking about your price point on capital outlay. Here's what your operating cost looks like out over 5 years. Here's where these inspection statuses are. One thing with airplanes, and I'm going to quote the old Framo commercial, pay me now or pay me later. So make sure you maintain your aircraft by the maintenance manual to the standards, and it will help save you in the long run.
Yeah, no, I appreciate, and I say the same thing to my buyers. Is like, you're going to ask me to sell this in you know 2-3 years. Like, is this a plane that I'm going to want to sell? You know, for you, or we're going to have
because I'm constantly going, okay, well, your Doc 12's coming up, your Doc 10's coming up. Here's we've got your E, F, and G coming up, your X-rays, your landing gear overhauls, and all of those things, you know, are very important on the purchase side of it, and being able to know that you're buying a quality machine that's been well taken care of and has a good pedigree history.
Well, as we kind of wrap up, Barry, like, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I'm sure we'll connect again in the future. What's Southern Sky Aviation up to? What do you guys do? What do you want to let our audience know about what you guys are doing? Because there's so much going on, and I'm always happy when we have an opportunity to work together.
So Southern Sky we're growing every day. We've been able to grow our fleet over the past 3 years to expand not only from Birmingham, Huntsville, Mobile, Alabama, into Kennesaw, Georgia. Outside of that, on our charter side, we have our repair station here in Birmingham, Alabama, where we handle turboprop, jet, piston. We specialize in Textron products, Citations, King Airs. And we recently started running our first FBO in Pascagoula, Mississippi. So it is actually right next to Biloxi. It's a great airport to fly into, to go to the casinos down there. It's right. I mean, it's a straight shot along the interstate. There's no driving through traffic. There's no red light. So, and then we just announced at the beginning of this year, we broke ground. We just got the lease at the Panama City Airport, and we'll be building an FBO there. We should be operational sometime next year.
That's great. Well, where can people find more information or contact you?
SouthernSkyAviation.com is our website. We post a lot of our activity on there. And in terms of me, my contact information is on the website, and I believe you have my LinkedIn link as well. And I can say that, you know, for somebody looking for a charter, feel free to email us at charter@southernskyAviation.com.
Sure. Anyone looking for charter, anyone looking for management, acquisitions, whatever you guys need in private aviation, Barry and the team at Southern Sky Aviation, you can't go wrong. So thanks a lot, Barry.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom. You have a good day.
I appreciate you checking out this video. Before I continue, I want you to go to theultimatejetguide.com, where I've put together a full guide for jet buyers like yourself.